Exactly 60 years ago, on March 21, 1963, the last permanent inhabitants left Alcatraz Island. The boat brought ashore about 3 dozen pale, silent men whose hands and feet were handcuffed and shackled. So ended the story of one of the most famous prisons in the world, designed for the most dangerous and hardened criminals. RBC Life tells how a prison fortress appeared on a small rocky island, whether anyone managed to escape from it, why it was closed and what is there now. The small island of Alcatraz, located in San Francisco Bay about 2 kilometers from the coast, began to be actively developed in the middle of the 19th century after the discovery of gold reserves in California. The appearance of many ships in this area contributed to the construction of a lighthouse on Alcatraz, which became the first such structure on the west coast of the United States. The population growth of San Francisco against the background of the gold rush required additional protection of the bay, so in 1850 the construction of a fort began on the island. The geographical location of Alcatraz, washed by the cold waters of the Pacific Ocean with strong currents, made it an ideal place for isolating people, so prisoners of war, as well as military personnel who committed disciplinary violations or crimes, began to be exiled to the island. In 1911, through the efforts of prisoners, a modern prison complex was built called the Rock, which became world famous. However, the U.S. Army used it for its needs for a relatively short time. After a little over 20 years, the institution was transferred to the Ministry of Justice. Law enforcement officers were in dire need of a new maximum security prison due to the explosive growth of crime in the country during the Great Depression. The first criminals arrived on the island in 1934. The complex was designed for 450 prisoners, but on average only 250 people were on the island at the same time. Those exiled to Alcatraz were kept in solitary cells measuring 2.7 times 1.5 meters. In other words, the average man, stretching out his arms, could touch both walls with them. Amenities included a sink with cold running water, a toilet in the corner, and a small cot. Initially, prisoners were strictly forbidden to talk to each other, but sometimes they managed to exchange a couple of phrases while eating or walking in the courtyard. Some prisoners communicated through a system of sewer pipes, draining water from toilets, but such attempts at communication were suppressed by the prison administration. In addition, it was always very cold on the island, so the cameras located on the high tiers of the complex, where it was slightly warmer than in damp rooms located at ground level, were considered more prestigious. However, some prisoners found their advantages in the harsh Alcatraz regime. One of them recalled that the system with single cameras practically negated the likelihood of assault or sexual violence by neighbors. In addition, the staff was quite loyal, albeit taciturn, and the food was considered the best in the entire U.S. prison system. For example, at Christmas, criminals were waiting for a festive dinner consisting of roast turkey with sauce, mashed potatoes and bread with vegetable butter substitute. Alcatraz was also one of the few American prisons where prisoners could take a hot shower. However, this privilege was not due to humanistic considerations. The administration believed that the prisoners, accustomed to comfort and poorly hardened, would not be able to swim across the cold San Francisco Bay, which left them with a minimum chance of a successful escape. Nevertheless, in the 29-year history of the federal prison, they tried to escape from it at least 14 times. A total of 36 convicts, 23 of them were caught, 6 were shot, 2 drowned, and 5 more are missing. The most famous escape attempt was made by bank robber Frank Morris, as well as brothers John and Clarence Anglin in June 1962. In order to get into the unguarded service corridor located behind the cells, prisoners for several months expanded the vents with a homemade drill assembled from a spoon and a vacuum cleaner motor. They had to work during the musical hour before lights out, when prisoners were allowed to play the accordion, which drowned out the noise of the instrument. The loopholes in the wall were masked with fake segments made of plywood. But this is not the last invention of the prisoners. In order for the guards not to find them missing during their night rounds, Morris and the Anglins left in their beds dummies of their own heads made of papier-mâché and hair stolen from a barber shop. They were going to get to the mainland with the help of a homemade inflatable raft made of rubberized raincoats and oars made of plywood. It is known for certain that the prisoners managed to get out of the cells, climb up the engineering pipes to the roof of the prison block, go down to the water and sail away from the shore on an improvised vessel. What happened to Morris and the Anglin brothers next? History is silent. No one saw them alive or dead anymore. According to one version, the escapees drowned in the cold waters of San Francisco Bay, but there are suggestions that they reached the shore safely, and later left the United States, going to South America. Formally, the investigation of the escape has not been closed to this day. This story formed the basis of the 1979 film Escape from Alcatraz, where the role of Frank Morris was played by Clint Eastwood. Over 3 decades, a little more than 1.5 thousand prisoners have passed through Alcatraz, most of whom were particularly dangerous criminals. The worst of the worst were sent to the island, those who grossly violated the regime in previous prisons, threatened the safety of other convicts, and were considered the most prone to escape. The list of the most famous prisoners includes the Chicago gangster of Italian origin Al Capone, who was transferred to prison for the purpose of complete isolation in order to prevent him from leading a criminal empire from behind bars. Arriving at Alcatraz, a high-ranking bandit tried to get special privileges for himself, but the administration refused them to him. Prohibition-era gangster George Barnes, known by the nickname Machine Gun Kelly, and criminal Alvin Karpis were also held on the island. They were one of the few criminals against whom the U.S. authorities used the term public enemy, which denoted their extreme danger and incorrigibility. In addition, Robert Stroud, known as the Birdman from Alcatraz, served a life sentence in a California prison. In prison he studied the behavior and physiology of birds, about which he wrote a number of scientific papers. Stroud even dedicated the film Bird Lover from Alcatraz with Burt Lancaster in the title role. He also became the prototype of one of the characters in the film Escape from Shawshank, the prison librarian Brooks, who tamed the raven. The Alcatraz Federal Prison was closed on March 21, 1963, when the last prisoners, redistributed to other U.S. institutions, left the island accompanied by guards. The decision was made by the authorities due to the high costs of maintaining the complex. Everything necessary, from food to equipment, had to be delivered there by water from the mainland. In addition, buildings and communication systems quickly fell into disrepair due to winds with salty sea spray, which required expensive major repairs worth more than $1 million. At the same time, the government did not have a final decision on the future of Alcatraz. Many various projects were considered for the further use of the island, from the installation of the UN monument on it to the construction of an amusement park. Alcatraz was also targeted by Indians who, in accordance with one of the federal laws, as Native Americans, could claim to occupy any abandoned state property. For several years, they have made a number of attempts to symbolically seize the island in order to attract public attention, but all attempts were stopped by the authorities. However, in 1969, a group of activists who occupied Alcatraz for more than a year and a half was able to settle on the island. The Indians set up wigwams, burned bonfires, painted graffiti on the walls of the prison and even regularly went on the radio with their own program broadcast on the wave of the UC Berkeley student station. The occupiers finally left the island in the summer of 1971, when a severe fire broke out on Alcatraz, destroying most of their infrastructure. At the same time, the U.S. government finally decided to make the island part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and 2 years later the former prison was opened to tourists by organizing regular ferries and boats from San Francisco. Since then, about 1 million people come to the island every year. From the pier to the main prison building, they have to overcome the path along broken roads and steep stairs, which is equivalent to walking up to the 13th floor. At the same time, drinking and eating, according to the law, is allowed only in specially designated places. Quiet sunny weather can suddenly give way to fog and squally icy wind. Therefore, even for tourists, visiting once one of the harshest prisons in the world is far from the most attractive idea.